This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. South African authorities call a spike in teenage pregnancies an outbreak that urgently needs to be contained.
We are responsible. We are to be blamed. We have failed our children.
The 2018 Ibrahim Index points out that Africa has failed to generate economic opportunities for its youth population despite growth in GDP.
Africa really should be run by young people because this is the largest constituency.
From militant leader to politician, a former member of Al-Shabaab has been cleared to run for elections in Somalia. Also in the program, crossing musical boundaries, we meet the South African DJs making it big in Europe without the help of a record label.
But we're really happy that we came with something truly South African and authentic, and people actually fell in love with it.
In sport, it's the first leg of the African Champions League final with Egypt's Al Ahly bidding for a record-extending 9th continental title. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. More than 7 million girls across the globe will fall pregnant before they turn 18 every year. And the majority of them live in Africa. Niger, Mozambique and Guinea have some of the highest number of adolescent girls giving birth. While there are fewer teenage pregnancies in South Africa, the numbers are still staggering. Nomsa Maseko went to the northern province of Limpopo to meet the young mothers.
Facing the biggest test of her young life. On the eve of the start of her final school examinations, Kulufelo Mwahwalula returns to the grave of one of her babies. Just 17 years old, she gave birth to triplets 3 months ago. Kulufelo wanted to ask her daughter to watch over her siblings and that she's confident she'll pass as she prepares for her final examinations.
I can feel it. I will pass. I've worked hard despite the pregnancy. I have to pass high school. It determines my future, and it determines their future.
While most students her age spend a lot of time studying, Kulufelo has a lot more work to do. She can only settle down with her books once her babies are asleep.
Kulu, why didn't you use a condom with your boyfriend?
I just don't know. I don't even remember.
There's a lot of information about sex education at school, but we just don't listen. We just ignore it. We think we know better. Even at home, we ignore advice from our parents.
At Kulufelo's school, 26 other learners fell pregnant this year. But the problem isn't just in this area. Out of more than 1.7 million learners in the province, 16,000 fell pregnant in the last year. And 378 of those are younger than 15. Students who fall pregnant are encouraged to stay in school for as long as possible. In the Bembe district, parents are worried. The education department says teenage pregnancy is a major social and systemic problem in South Africa, that even parents of learners from this school have come here asking for a meeting to discuss this issue. They refuse to talk to us on camera, but it's clear there are no easy answers to the cause of teenage pregnancy. Everyone here acknowledges intervention is needed. Nomsa Maseko, BBC News, Limpopo, South Africa.
I'm now joined by Ross Ebdon from Plan International, whose top priorities are helping girls with issues of sexual reproduction and teenage pregnancies. Thanks for taking time to talk to us on Focus on Africa. We've had that lady in that clip saying that society is to blame for failing to guide our children. To what extent is this a reality in countries that you operate in, like Niger and Mozambique?
Yes, indeed, I think that really is the case. Society puts a lot of expectations on young girls in particular to become mothers from a very early age. Often they're valued less than their brothers and their fellow male friends. And so they do not receive the same sort of opportunities in education and future work opportunities. So their options are really quite limited. Also, access to education around understanding your body, your sexual rights, and what services are available to you is very limited for many young people. Comprehensive sexuality education is not really available through the education system, and so many young people really don't know what their options are.
From the experience of Plan International, what has been the most successful way of driving change?
We've done a lot of work with young people themselves, so encouraging and supporting youth activists to understand the issues and to really drive the change forward themselves is really the way that we need to support this kind of change from the grassroots upwards. So we have, for example, been working with young activists in Uganda. A young woman named Sophie, who I've met on a couple of occasions, has actually mobilized thousands of people to get behind a petition to take to the Ugandan government to demand that there are youth-friendly, adolescent-friendly services for sexual and reproductive health available, provided by the Ugandan government. And actually, they've responded very positively and made a commitment to train health workers to provide these services. So that's a real success.
Ross, we almost talk about girls, but we hardly ever talk about boys and what role they can play to drive change.
Absolutely. So many of the young activists we work with are young men as well. We have a program across the world called Champions of Change, which works with young men to understand the sort of gender norms and the stereotypes that exist in their communities, and to challenge those, to challenge the expectations placed on girls that mean that they're not valued as much as boys, to challenge the sexual violence, which is often very common, and to really challenge those power differences that exist and to become sort of champions and leaders themselves.
Fascinating. Thank you for taking time to talk to us, Ross Ebdon from Plan International. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Now, the 2018 Ibrahim Index of African Governance was released recently. It showed that Ivory Coast, Guinea, Somalia, Tunisia and Zimbabwe are among the 10 most improved countries. Now, this year's index focuses on the last decade, that's between 2008 and 2017, and looks at corruption, rule of law, human rights, job creation, education and health. Now, overall, Africa's governance trajectory remains positive. Almost 71% of the citizens have seen improved governance over the last 10 years. Mauritius takes up the top spot in the rankings, while Somalia comes last on the list at 54th place. But the index shows that despite strong GDP growth over the last 10 years, Africa has failed to generate economic opportunities for its booming youth population. Well, I sat down with the chairman of the foundation that released the index, Mo Ibrahim, and began by asking him what could potentially happen if governments ignore the youth.
Massive upheavals, because you have frustrated young people with no jobs and no hope for a job. The worst thing for people is to lose hope. And if they are desperate, what are they going to do? Just put yourself in your place. What are you going to do? You either sell the family possessions, cows and house or whatever you have, and pay a trafficker to take you across the Sahara and the Mediterranean, hopefully for a job or a future somewhere else. The chance you're going to die in the way or drown in the Mediterranean. Or you pick up arms and join a Boko Haram or whatever crazy group out there. At least it gives you salary and it gives you identity. You feel you are somebody, you are doing something. And that is very dangerous.
We are seeing some young people pushing into politics. We've seen South Africa, the opposition is pretty strong and young. And we've seen, of course, Ethiopia, as what happened recently with the new prime minister. We've seen Liberia with George Weah. Surely we are moving in the right direction as a continent in terms of leadership and youth.
It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Look, if 60% of the population is below 25, this is the largest constituency in Africa. Africa really should be run by young people because this is the largest constituency.
Is there one particular country you can say, look, this is what this government has done and this is how they've improved the youth situation in the country?
Yeah, you can always point to countries like Rwanda or Ethiopia.
What did they do?
Economic growth, investment, create jobs. That's clear. But of course, this is not enough because people will immediately point out about the unrest in some parts of Ethiopia. And it was very interesting when I interviewed the ex-Prime Minister Haile Mariam a few months ago in our annual meeting in Africa. And he said, listen, for 15 years, we had the highest growth in Africa, or probably everywhere, 9%, 10% on average, every year, for 15 years. He said, but when people eat, then they start to ask, what about my rights? Mm-hmm. And that's a point. So this, a very interesting point, is growth, jobs, and rights. That's what we need to stabilize the situation going forward. Then we need to ask ourselves also, what is the way forward really? Is it sustainable that each family now have an average 6 or 7 or 8 kids? Is that situation sustainable? Why nobody is discussing this in Africa?
Mo Ibrahim speaking there. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. In one town in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the central Kasai province, 2,600 people have been victims of sexual violence since May last year. Doctors Without Borders say more than 150 were under the age of 15 and at least 20 were under the age of 5. The Nigerian army has cited a video of US President Donald Trump to justify opening fire on a Muslim Shiite group in Abuja this week. Now, in the clip, Mr. Trump says US soldiers should respond with force to migrants who are making their way to America, stating, when they throw rocks, consider it as a rifle. Now, South Africa's new finance minister says the country's national airline should be shut down. Tito Mboweni said that South African Airlines, which has been losing money for years, was not worth bailing out anymore. Now, a former Al-Shabaab commander has been cleared to run for public office in Somalia. Mukhtar Robow, also known as Abu Mansour, was previously banned from contesting the election by the central government from Mogadishu. Ahmed Adan has a story of how he went from being a militant leader to potential politician.
Mukhtar Robow, known as Abu Mansour, was a very senior member of the Islamic Union Courts in 2006 in Somalia. After Ethiopian troops defeated the group, he was one of the founders of Al-Shabaab militants. In 2007, he became the spokesman of this group and later became the deputy head of Al-Shabaab. In 2002, as he said, he defected from the group after ideological differences between him and the former top Al-Shabaab leader, Ahmed Abdi Godane. Later, he has created and started his own militia group in Bokor region in southwestern Somalia. In June last year, following reports that Robow is in talks with the Somalia government, the US State Department removed him from its terror list. And after several attacks from the militant group, he decided to surrender to the Somalia government in August last year. Early October this year, he announced that he has interest to become the president of southwestern state of Somalia, which Somalia government opposed due to international sanctions against him. He has said that he has accepted requests from his supporters from the region, although there are other very popular candidates running for this position. So he has very little chance to become the president of southwestern state of Somalia. However, he is promising if he won, he will wipe out Al-Shabaab from those regions.
Amin Adan reporting there. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Still to come in basketball, Joel Embiid was the star player for the Philadelphia 76ers on Friday night. Find out why. I'm Sophie Ikenya and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: South African authorities concerned over a spate of teenage pregnancies in Limpopo, as more than 7 million girls worldwide are expected to fall pregnant this year, most of them living in Africa. Now, World Cities Day has been marked right across the globe this week. The theme is Better Cities, Better Life. And in Kenya, they are taking that quite seriously, building roads that are safer for both motorists and pedestrians. It's hoped the work will reduce the 3,000 annual deaths on the country's roads. Ferdinand Omondi reports.
A ceremony for the occasion. This road, built in the Nairobi suburb of Eastleigh, connects two major highways and is expected to ease traffic by offering one more connecting route for motorists. But more importantly, it has been built with a well-marked special walkway on either side for pedestrians and cyclists, a feature that is largely missing on many of Kenya's roads, yet more than half of the city population travels on foot.
We are doing everything that we need.
It is so important to make sure that both pedestrians and people who will want to use non-polluting means of transportation. We have cities in Europe like Amsterdam where more than half of the people move on bicycles. It's not impossible, you can do it. But of course you need the roads to do it, and this is why we're here today.
Most of Kenya's link roads are neglected and the existing highways have literally no cyclist path, let alone pedestrian walkways. According to the National Transport Safety Authority, nearly 1,000 pedestrians lost their lives on Kenyan roads in the last year. This new project is part of a master plan to have an urbanized and safer transport network in Nairobi by 2025. This is your typical Nairobi traffic, chaotic and overcrowded. It is shared by cars, motorbikes, pedestrians, cyclists, all manner of vehicles, and even hawkers cramming the space. And when this happens, the ones most at risk are the pedestrians. The danger of Nairobi's congested roads is a familiar story to many, and one that Jama experienced and lived to tell the story.
I was riding on a motorbike taxi along a link road nearby. Then the motorbike collided with a bus, and I found myself under the bus. I got serious injuries on my shoulder and my leg. After the incident, I fainted. My leg was operated on, and the doctor put a metal plate. I have spent a lot of money.
It's accidents like these that this European Union-funded project aims at reducing at a cost of about $50 million. The government says completed walkways and bridges in other parts of the city are already helping save lives. In the end, Nairobi should have better, safer roads for all users, which hopefully translates to less chaos and reduced accidents. Ferdinand Omondi, BBC News, Nairobi.
You're watching Focus on Africa. Time now for some sport. Mim.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Now, football fans have been queuing up overnight in the hope of getting their hands on some tickets for one of the biggest games in town. Egypt's Al Ahly will be hosting Tunisia's Esperance in the first leg of the African Champions League final, which kicks off in just over an hour in Alexandria. Both sides admit that it will be a tough task this time around to win the title. Al Ahly are aiming for a record-extending 9th title, whereas Esperance will be going for 3rd. History will be made tonight as video assistant referee or VAR will be used for the first time. Al Ahly's coach Patrice Carteron has welcomed it.
The competition in Africa will consider the European schedule. I think things are going in the good way, and for a final we know that it can be every decision can be so important and so sensitive that I really appreciate that there is a video like that. I think for the referee it will help them to be more confident, and for both teams to know that they can play without thinking about any consequences with any mistake of the referee. So for both teams and for everybody, I think it's a really good thing that we have the video, the assistant video for this final.
In other football news, Liverpool will be heading to the Emirates Stadium on Saturday when they take on Arsenal. And there will be big African football stars to watch out for in that encounter. Arsenal winless in 6 Premier League meetings with Liverpool, but Gabon's Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang will be hoping to end that. He's been directly involved in 22 goals in his 23 Premier League appearances with the club and has been nominated as October's Premier League Player of the Month. For Liverpool, their Egyptian star Mohamed Salah is expected to be ready for their fixture despite a wrist injury. But one man who's been ruled out is Guinea's Naby Keita with a hamstring injury.
In football, not too serious injury takes still 2, 3, 4 weeks. So that's then they were lucky. If you have an injury like that, that only means in the Premier League 20 games. So that's how it is.
Let's move on to some tennis. South Africa's Kevin Anderson was knocked out of the third round of the Paris Masters on Thursday by Japan's Kei Nishikori in straight sets, 6-4, 6-4. Both men had also faced each other last weekend when Anderson won the Vienna Open. It helped the 32-year-old to secure a spot at the ATP Tour Finals this month. And finally, to the NBA, what a night for Cameroon's Joel Embiid for the Philadelphia 76ers. He had 41 points and 13 rebounds as they beat the Los Angeles Clippers on Thursday night. Now, it's the 6th time this season that Embiid scored 30 or more points and 10 rebounds in a game. They currently sit top half in their Eastern Conference. And that's all the sports. Back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Mimosa. Thank you. Now, it's called gom, and it's a type of South African house music that's becoming increasingly popular in clubs across Europe. Now, this weekend, it is being recognized at MTV's European Music Awards. Distraction Boys from Durban are 2 DJs who've been nominated for Best African Act. Nomia Iqbal went to meet them, and just a warning, her report contains flashing images.
Music that we make is 100% authentically South African music. It's not made anywhere across the world. It's called gom, comes from the dusty streets of Durban.
Distraction Boys have sold millions of records, won multiple industry awards, and they've done it by themselves with no major record label. Q and Golmax were born here in the township of KwaMashu, which has one of the highest murder rates in South Africa. It was in this house where they created their first album on an old PC. What is it about KwaMashu that inspires that sound that you guys make?
It has to be the struggles, eh?
Yeah, the struggles, yeah.
It has to be the struggles. I mean, the crime is on an all-time high.
People, if you can show them like that came from KwaMashu, maybe
they won't
believe you.
Why?
Because like KwaMashu is just like a township, just a hood.
But despite their tiny setup, this summer Distraction Boys performed at one of Europe's largest dance festivals. They've also played gigs in London.
It's amazing! We're still in awe, like we're shocked. Who are you? What's going on? So it's like that, man. But we're really happy that we came with something truly South African and authentic, and people actually fell in love with it. So.
They want to perform in Ibiza, where the world's top DJs play, and follow in the footsteps of famous South African artists Black Coffee and Euphonic. Euphonic has been in the music industry for more than 20 years, working independently. But even he admits it has its limitations.
You can be a musician that really loves music, but ultimately at the end of the day, this thing is a business. If you're an artist in South Africa, you don't really need a major, but if you've got global ambitions, then you definitely do.
For many South African artists, keeping their sound true to its roots is hugely important. But to make the biggest impact with their music, it means they may inevitably have to give up some control. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News.
Well, before we go, a quick look again at our top story today on Focus on Africa. South African health authorities have described the rate of teenage pregnancies in Limpopo province as an outbreak that urgently needs to be contained. Around 180,000 adolescent girls fall pregnant every single year. It's part of a continent-wide problem with millions of young girls across Africa falling pregnant annually. Niger, Mozambique and Guinea have some of the highest numbers of teenagers giving birth. Well, that's all from the program. From me and the rest of the team, thanks for your company.